In 555 CE, a Roman emperor controlled more territory than any ruler had in over a century. North Africa, Italy, Spain. It looked like Rome's greatest comeback story. Within 80 years, half that empire would belong to a religion that didn't even exist yet. This is how winning becomes losing. Here's the contrast that haunts historians. On the left, Justinian's empire at its peak in 555, the Mediterranean nearly a Roman lake again. On the right, the same empire just 80 years later, Syria gone, Egypt gone, North Africa slipping away. The Arab conquest had reshaped the world. Justinian couldn't have imagined this future. He died believing he'd restored Roman glory. The question is whether he was right or catastrophically wrong. To understand how this happened, we start in 527 CE. Justinian becomes emperor of what we call the Byzantine Empire, though they called themselves Romans. The western half of the old empire had fallen to Germanic kingdoms in the previous century. Vandals held North Africa, Ostrogoths controlled Italy, Visigoths ruled Spain. Justinian inherited only the eastern Mediterranean, Greece, Anatolia, Syria, Egypt, wealthy territories, but not the full Roman inheritance. By 540, Byzantium reached its peak power, and Justinian had a plan. Watch the expansion unfold. First, North Africa. Justinian's general Belisarius crushed the Vandal kingdom in just 2 years. Modern Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, all Roman again, then coastal Spain, seized from the Visigoths. Finally, the prize, Italy itself. The Ostrogothic kingdom fell after 2 brutal decades of war. Rome, Ravenna, the old imperial heartland, back under Roman control. By 555, Justinian had recreated something remarkable, an empire stretching from Spain to Syria, the Mediterranean nearly encircled. For a moment, he'd restored the empire of Constantine and Diocletian. This was Reconquest, retaking territory that had been Roman for centuries before the barbarian invasions. Justinian believed he was correcting a historical wrong. Why did Justinian pursue this? He held a grandiose conception of empire. He believed his predecessors had been negligent. They'd let Roman lands slip away to barbarians. The empire couldn't legitimately call itself Roman while holding only the eastern Mediterranean. Rome itself was in barbarian hands. Justinian was willing to tax his subjects heavily. He was willing to risk the eastern frontier against Persia. Territory and prestige mattered more than caution. He saw himself not as an innovator, but as a restorer. He was bringing the empire back to what it should always have been. So Justinian succeeded. He recreated the Roman Empire. So why do historians call this a mistake? The answer lies in a concept called Imperial overextension. Here's how it works. An empire expands, gaining new territory. More territory requires more defense, longer borders, more soldiers, more fortifications. Defense costs rise. Eventually, those costs exceed available resources. The empire stretches beyond its capacity. It weakens from within. This isn't unique to Byzantium. It's a pattern that repeats across history. Empires don't usually fall to external conquest alone. They hollow themselves out first. Consider the parallels. The British Empire after World War II. Britain had won, but the war had exhausted it. Maintaining global commitments became impossible. Decolonization followed within 2 decades. The Spanish Empire in the 17th century overextended across 4 continents. It couldn't sustain the cost. Decline was gradual but irreversible. The Soviet Union in the 1980s, military spending to maintain its empire consumed resources needed elsewhere. Collapse came suddenly. 4 empires, 4 centuries apart, same pattern. Expansion that looked like strength became the source of fatal weakness. Here's where it gets complicated. We know Justinian should have focused on Persia, his primary rival to the east. We know that within 80 years, Arab armies would conquer Syria, Egypt, and Persia itself, territories far more valuable than Italy. We know the Western reconquests couldn't be held long term, but Justinian knew none of this. Islam didn't exist yet. The Arab tribes were divided and marginal. Persia seemed manageable. The western lands were historically Roman. From where Justinian stood, reconquest was reasonable. This is the historian's dilemma. We judge past decisions with knowledge of outcomes that leaders couldn't possibly have known. Look at what Justinian actually knew versus what we know now. He knew Persia was a threat, but it seemed manageable through diplomacy and limited war. He knew the Western lands were rightfully Roman. Centuries of history supported this. He believed reconquest would restore imperial glory. And it did in his lifetime. We know Persia would remain the primary threat until the Arabs destroyed it. We know Muslim conquests would reshape the entire region. We know the reconquest couldn't be held. The question, do we judge by his knowledge or our hindsight? This brings us to a question that goes beyond Justinian. How should we evaluate any historical decision? Here's a framework. First, what did the leader actually know at the time? Not what we know, what they knew. Second, what were the reasonable options given that knowledge? Justinian could have focused east or west. Both had arguments. Third, only then consider outcomes. Outcomes matter, but they can't be the only measure. A good decision can have bad results. A bad decision can succeed through luck, and this framework applies to any historical judgment. Imperial overextension remains relevant today. Nations still face trade-offs between ambition and sustainability. Military commitments, economic expansion, political influence all carry costs that can exceed capacity. The pattern Justinian exemplified hasn't disappeared. And the tension between what seemed right then and what we know now applies to our own decisions. We make choices in uncertainty. History judges with full information. Justinian's reconquests were both a reasonable attempt to restore Roman glory and a strategic mistake that left Byzantium vulnerable for centuries. Both statements are true. Every leader makes decisions in fog. History judges in daylight. The question isn't whether Justinian was right or wrong, it's whether we can understand why he chose as he did.